Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host tonight, Tommy D. Duncan III, otherwise known as TD3. It is Wednesday night, April the 17th, 2024. And if it is Wednesday night, it is definitely Black Men Speak. We would like to acknowledge Liquid for our theme song. Thank For Us Films for our virtual studio. And if you have not done so already, please subscribe, like, and or share this show with others so that you can now be the most knowledgeable person in your network. Just want to give everybody a heads up this evening. My co-host and friend J.R. Stewart is a little bit under the weather today, so I will be flying solo, but we have a great show in store for you tonight. We definitely hope that you will enjoy tonight's show. So without that being said, I'm going to rock something a little bit different. I typically don't do this, but since we have a special guest, I had to put on the top. So, folks, we are going to go ahead and start off with our birthday babies for this upcoming week. And if you have a birthday in the mid-latter part of April, you may share a birthday with the following folks. First, one of my favorite actresses, Kimberly Elise. If you are one who loves the box office and the big screen, you've seen her on several movies and TV shows. One of my favorites, Set It Off. You think of Beloved, the Toni Morrison book that was turned, of course, into a motion picture film. And plenty of other films out there. John Q with Denzel Washington. Matter of fact, I think she has co-starred with Denzel Washington on at least 3 films. She has a birthday today on April the 17th. So happy birthday, Kimberly Elise. All right. Our second birthday coming up in just a couple of days is the great Candace Parker, who has a birthday on April the 19th. Considered one of the greatest all-time players in WNBA history thus far. And she actually was a superstar when she was in college. She was a 5-time All-Star selection in the WNBA Rookie of the Year and MVP in the WNBA in 2008. Played for Tennessee, where she led the Tennessee Volunteers to 2 consecutive championships, and the rest is history. But happy birthday for those of you who have her in your Rolodex. Tell Candace happy birthday in a couple of days. Next, guess who this guy is? If you are in the rap game, you know this brother and his dynamic smile. Killer Mike, rapper, activist, Grammy award-winning artist, and all-around good guy who's advocating for the community. He has a birthday coming up on April the 20th. So if you know Killer Mike, wish him a happy birthday. And last, but definitely not least, we have the great Kathy Hughes. Actually, Kathy is the second wealthiest African-American woman in the United States, they say, behind Oprah Winfrey. But for those of you who keep up with the business world, she is also an entrepreneur, businesswoman. For those of you who are familiar with Radio One, now Urban One, she, of course, was the owner of the radio station and is an all-around phenomenal media mogul. So happy birthday to Kathy Hughes, who I believe will be 77 on April the 22nd, starting next week. So those are our birthday babies for today. And, of course, we cannot go without acknowledging we do have a new entry to the realm of ancestry. Everybody knows this face, the Juice, O.J. Simpson, one of my favorite all-time athletes when I was a young kid. Growing up, there's a lot that you can say, of course, about O.J. Had a great career, had a great life. Of course, anyone who's been around for the last 20-some-odd years knows that that didn't come without some complications. But we're going to focus on really the best of his life and his legacy. Of course, he was a USC Trojan where he played running back for the Trojans, won the Heisman Trophy Award in 1968. I'm not going to say how old I was, but I was living during that period of time. became an NFL All-Pro with the Buffalo Bills. I think eventually went to the San Francisco 49ers. Of course, was an entrance into the NFL Hall of Fame. For those of you who are old enough to know this, of course, he was one of the first major advocates in the commercial space, was the face of Hertz for several years. And then, of course, was also a sports analyst as well. So definitely a Renaissance man during that period of time, and one of the early athletes who did extremely well in the endorsement area. All of that being said, he died at the tender age of 76 years old on April the 10th. And of course, we want to send our condolences to his family, his friends, and his loved ones as well. So with all that being said, you will be remembered, OJ, the Juice. And we want to thank you for what you've done for sports and for the world. All that being said, now it is time to get to the meat and potatoes, the excitement in our show for this evening. So I am going to bring in my friend and cohort, the brother ASAR ALKEBULAN, also known as Uncle ASAR. And we're going to get to our topic for today, which is Pan Afrikanism, which actually we had ASAR on the show some months ago, where we talked about Pan Afrikanism and Kwanzaa in December of 2023. But we committed to bringing him back so that we could have a deeper conversation on what we did not finish at that time. So welcome our brother, author, thought leader, Pan Afrikanist, the ASAR ALKEBULAN. What's going on, brother?
Hey, man, what's happening, man? I appreciate you having me on the show again. And I first want to condemn the egregious genocide committed against the Palestinian people in Gaza by the nation of Israel, backed by the United States, as the world turns a blind eye. But with that said, yeah, man. Hey, what's happening, man? I want to wish a happy birthday to Elise Neal, that fine sister. I wish she was in my Rolodex. And the brother OJ, my condolences to his family. I remember when I started tackle football in the 5th grade. You know, OJ, we're not gonna date ourselves, tell what year that was. 32. I wanted to be number 32 because I was trying out for running back, and I got number 34. So my mother, who we just lost a couple of months ago, she brought home a poster of this cat, this football player, and he had number 34 because they had given me 34. And I was like, I don't want 30, I want 32.
Hey.
I was like, who is this guy? And you know who that guy turned out to be, number 34? Walter Payton.
Oh.
So I had Walter Payton's number, didn't know what was going to happen. But before we get started, let me say this, man. I'm looking in the comments, and all the sisters compliment you on how handsome you look. And I dressed especially for this program. So I want to see at least one compliment from Tanya, Audrey, because they just throwing them at you.
I think they're talking about you, bro. I think they're talking about you.
No. They were talking about you before I even got up here, man. Somebody just said, "Welcome back, ASAR." That's about it.
Yeah. So all that being said, we want to welcome Audrey K. Booker. We welcome Ms. Tanya Hall to the show tonight. Thank you for joining us. And of course, we want everybody to bring their questions, their thoughts, their observations, because we're going to talk about a lot. We want to get real deep. And I have known ASAR for a very long time, since college, since we were young pups. And, ASAR has been all over the place, from Bryan, Texas. Of course, we met in College Station at school at Texas A&M University. And he moved to D.C. after school was over, which was one of my favorite places. And so we went to D.C. I went to D.C. a couple times. We hung out together. And, you fell off the radar for a while, moved out the country, came back, we got connected. And so we are inevitably tied together, man, for life. So we're going to have some good conversation this evening. And I invite the audience to participate, because this is your show. We are just facilitating the process. So all that being said, let's get this thing talking. I mean, we began the conversation last December about Pan Afrikanism, what Pan Afrikanism is, what its philosophies are, what its thoughts. some of the players and influences in that. So let's reset for our audience who was not here in December and talk about the platform itself. First, though, tell us briefly, like the 2-minute version about yourself, and then we'll launch into the conversation.
2 minutes about myself. Yeah, so like you said, I'm from Bryan, Texas, graduate of Texas A&M University, where I met you almost 40 years ago. And
You had to do that.
yeah, man, I had to tell it. So, yeah, ironically, that's why I gained my socio-political consciousness at a predominantly white university, man.
Of all
Places, you know, the whole South African apartheid thing was at its height. Jesse Jackson ran for president in '88, and I was studying history. This cat from this visiting professor from Kansas turned me on to history instead of just dates. It was these dynamic personalities and these world-changing events that were all interrelated. And I started reading, and then I came upon Malcolm X's book, Malcolm X Speaks. Not his biography yet. I hadn't hit that yet, but I read his book, all of his speeches. And I was like, okay, this is what I'm trying to do. And funny enough, they won't tell you because I guess it's, you know, they keep their secrets, is that I actually applied to the CIA. I went in and took an 8-hour exam and wrote some stuff, and some best thing ever happened to me, they didn't want me. I guess they saw they were like, I guess this brother, no, we don't want this, we're gonna let this brother go. But yeah, man, so then I moved to DC. It was the center of the political universe, you know, public policy, world policy, unfortunately, disseminates from DC. And people don't believe me when I say it, but you talk about Kathy Hughes. I used to sit at home in my apartment. I used to sit at home in Bryan and watch Video Soul with Donnie Simpson. You know, part of that media community in DC. Kathy Hughes, Petey Green, Donnie Simpson, Angela Strickland, and all those people. And I would watch those videos on Video Soul, and I see all these fine sisters on that. And I was like, where are these fine sisters at? So Video Soul was in DC. And I was like, all right, I'm going to DC. George Clinton talked about the Chocolate City. I'm going to DC. So that's how I ended up in DC. And as we were discussing offline, one of the best things that ever happened to me was that I lost like my first 2 jobs in DC. And that gave me a lot of time to study. I didn't have to go to bed. I could go all over the city, going to lectures, going to performances, going to talks, and I could stay up, you know, get up in the middle of the day, listen to the radio, WPFW 89.3 in Washington, Jazz and Justice. They had different segments where a brother would come on, Ambrose R. Lane would read books. And then they had another segment called Freedom of Speech, and they would just play speeches. I got cassette tapes upon cassette tapes of different speeches. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, John Henry Clark, Amos Wilson. And I was seeing these people in person. And they had another segment with Dr. Jesse McDade out of Morgan State University called The Spear. And they had a brother that would host with him sometime, much like you and Jimmy. And I just want to say, you know, it's very convenient for Jimmy not to be here when I show up. That's all right. So, but this poet named Kenny Carroll, and I was a poet. And, you know, they just turned me on to different things, man, mentioning different books, like I said, and reading revolutionary poetry. And I had already began to write some little revolutionary poetry, but it just helped me develop as a Black nationalist, as a Pan Afrikanist, as, you know, what they call, you know, a conscious brother, you know, and as I told you, I define myself or characterize myself as just a good brother trying to make a difference, man.
Good deal. Well, hey, I appreciate that abbreviated introduction, because we know that's the abbreviated introduction. We'd also like to welcome Miss Marion Square on Black Men Speak on the chat line. So we're going to go ahead and get this started. So let's kind of take it from our conversation in December. We're going to take a couple of steps back to move forward. What is Pan-Africanism and why is it important?
Okay, so this time I brought my notes because the man, you know, like I told you on my job, I'm a academic advisor at the University of Texas, and we're in the midst of registration. So I didn't have time to really study my notes. And the capitalist system, which is the way that it is designed, is to keep us involved, as you mentioned before, keep us involved in the rat race where we don't have time to study and build institutions. So with that said, yeah, I brought my notes. But I will say, but let me start by saying this. Pan-Africanism is simply the working towards, and I always say working because you want to use a verb, working towards the total unification and liberation of African peoples on the continent and throughout the diaspora under scientific socialism. That's basically Pan Africanism.
Gotcha. And why is it important, and how long has it been around?
So Pan Africanism has been around since, well, like I said in the last on the last program, for me it has been around ever since a couple of brothers or a sister, whatever, in chains on their way to the slave ship looked at each other. They didn't speak the same language. They were not of the same ethnic group or tribe. And one nodded and one nodded. They looked at the white man that put him in chains, and they proceeded to try to cut his neck. So that is, for me, Pan Africanism, right? And so, like last time, we moved forward talking about the Maroons. Once we got on the ships and they're taking us to the so-called New World, we ran off the ships, ran up into the hills, and ran up to the woods. We didn't speak the same languages, we didn't have the same traditions, but we worked it out because we saw that we had the same interests. Is that we don't want to be oppressed, we don't want to be in chains. Then we talk about the Haitian Revolution, which is the largest and most successful slave revolt in they say in the Western Hemisphere, but I don't know of any other slave revolt, even Spartacus. I mean, that wasn't like the Haitian Revolution. So yeah, the most successful and largest slave revolt in the Western Hemisphere. Then we talked about the back to Africa movements, and a lot of those were sponsored by white individuals to help enslaved people go back to Africa. And the most notable, back to Africa movement, I guess you would call it, would be the creation of the nation of Liberia by the U.S. government. Yes. But still, it was a back to Africa movement. So then we talked about the formalizing Pan-Africanism with Henry Sylvester Williams, who was a West Indian living in the UK, and he felt like he had some ties with African leaders, and he felt like they needed a forum to talk about their interests, their goals, and their objectives and things like that. And he worked with W.B. Du Bois, and they started holding the Pan-African conferences between 1900 and 1945. And the thrust of it was that they wanted to dismantle racism in the U.S. and throw off imperialism in Africa. So you have some notable players like C.L.R. James, George Padmore. These are all and then all of the African leaders that headed those independent nations in the late 60s and 70s. They attended those conferences. Kwame Nkrumah, Nnamdi Azikiwe out of Nigeria, Jomo Kenyatta out of Kenya. All those, they played a part. Those conferences played a part in their thinking and their organizing in terms of liberating Africa. Then, of course, we want to talk about the Garvey movement. The Garvey movement boasted over 1 million members worldwide at its height. And the thrust of the Garvey movement was Black pride, Black power, and Black self-determination. Self-determination akin to the same thing when we talk about Kwanzaa, Kuji Chagalia, self-determination. We define ourselves, we name ourselves. So that's Pan-Africanism. And why is that important is that the oldest tactic in war is to divide and conquer, right?
Yes.
With unity, so we're going to have to get deep into it. So we're going to lay this broad brush. Unity, we lay claim to all that is Africa, meaning history, meaning resources into the future. But as long as we stay here and say, our history began in 1619, and by the way, Dr. John Henry Clark said, if you start with enslavement, everything looks like progress after that, right? So we start with 1619, and we think because we're the first Black to do this and the first Black to do that, then we're making progress. No, we built the damn pyramids. Let's be clear. We built the great Zimbabwe city-state. We are progenitors of the Nok culture. We built Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. These are the things that we have done. And when we talk about importance, this is what happened for me, and I've seen it happen for other people. When you begin to understand your history, and we can talk about the tree and the roots and that kind of thing a little later. When you begin to understand your culture and who you are as a person, it begins to build pride in you, that you can continue to persevere through adversity, that you can face temptation in the face. You can face fear in the face because you know who you are. We want to call ourselves Black. I remember I was dating a sister in DC, right? And she said, "I'm Black," but it's like, what the hell is black? You know, nobody wants to be African because of the propaganda surrounding Africa. It's death, disease, poverty, and whatever else. You know, nappy hair, big lips, big nose, that kind of thing. So it's like she's, you know, I'm black, but what is black? Dr. Clark was like, black tells you how you look, but it doesn't tell you who you are. So when you begin to know who you are, that is the thing that gives you confidence. That is the thing that gives you power. And so that's why Pan Africanism is important. And you know, you mentioned you wanted people to engage us in the chat. I really want people to engage us in the chat because I want them to ask questions. Because I'm not, I mean, I'm not a lecturer. You know, I've done some lectures, but I'm not a lecturer, and I don't want to just talk.
No, that completely makes sense. So, you know, when we talk about in principle what Pan Africanism is, how it evolved, there are a lot of folks, some of which you mentioned, that have been influencers in this movement, so to speak. So you talk about the Nkrumahs of the world. I mean, you even talk about someone more recently on the African continent, Muammar Gaddafi, who was taken out by the United States under the guise of something totally unrelated to why he was taken out. But, you know, you talk about the Marcus Garveys of the world and the UNIA. Of course, you know, in America, you know, we typically think of Garvey, we typically think of the Nation of Islam in terms of unifying Black people. Who are some of the other folks who have had a significant influence on Pan-Africanism in the United States? And let's talk a little bit more about those in Africa and how and where they converge, because does it look the same on the African continent as it does, for instance, in the United States?
Well, early on, it looked the same because you have people like Kwame Ture, who took the name of Kwame Nkrumah, and Ahmed Sekou Touré of Guinea, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. He took those names, formerly Stokely Carmichael. People might remember him with SNCC back in the day. And actually, they started the Black Panther Party. We think about Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, but in Lyons County, Alabama, with the voters registration movement, they started the Black Panther Party because they were disenchanted with the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party chose a white cock or a white rooster, and they even had white supremacy on it. And they were like, you know, we can't get down with that. So they started their own Black Panther Freedom Party or whatever, and they chose the black cat. They was like, everybody can recognize the black cat. So they chose that black cat, and then the brothers in California wrote to them later and said, can we use that? And that's how the Black Panther Party that we know of for self-defense started. So we talk about Kwame Ture, and then we can talk about Kwame Nkrumah. Right. Kwame Nkrumah was a visionary. I mean, this guy's whole vision was to unite Africa. There's some evidence. I'm not sure, because he was educated in the West. He participated in the Pan African Congresses. He took those ideas and took them back to Africa to free Ghana, first free. So there's no doubt that he understood what Pan-Africanism is, and those people who attended those conferences were from all over the world. Again, W.E.B. Du Bois, Henry Sylvester Williams, George Patmore, they were all Caribbean brothers. They were all West Indians. So he understood that, and he went around the country, and he understood that no one on the continent is free until the entire continent is free, until we're all are free, right? So that is the idea of Pan-Africanism. So I think what you may be alluding to, and we talked about this the last time we talked about Agenda 63 in terms of modern day. And the Agenda 63 is and I got my notes right here, and it talks about how, you know, 50 years from 2013 to 2063, it is a blueprint to transform Africa into basically a world powerhouse, right? But as I said, throughout the document, they pay homage to those early Pan-Africanists once, talking about those the word means Pan-African is everywhere. Global Africans. That's throughout the diaspora of African descent, whatever you want to say. But the rest of the document talks about just Africa. Mm-hmm. So, and incidentally, when I gave the talk at the LBJ school here at the University of Texas, the cat that invited me, when we talked later, he said some of the students were confused about Pan-Africanism globally, and then Pan-Africanism. I said, well, what was confusing? Two things can be the same, can be true at the same time. I mean, we understand that you can have a racist. He doesn't have to wear a white sheet and a dunce cap. That's, you know, Klan. That's a racist. But also over here, somebody who just believes that the world is better run by white people, that's a racist too. Those two things exist at the same time. So how is it that they couldn't understand? There's one Pan Africanism that's including everybody on the continent and throughout the diaspora, and just the brothers that are talking about the things on the continent. And as I shared with Jimmy, it's like those people are elitists. They're aristocrats, right? They were put in power just like Idi Amin, just like Mobutu, put in power, or those bourgeois classes, those middle classes are put in power, and their interests are nearly identical to the Western interests. And Kwame Ture said this is the worst type of African, because they want luxury in the midst of abject poverty. You have people and I've lived there, so I know. I've traveled there, Nigeria, West Africa, more than a dozen times, right? And I've been on medical missions where I've seen the state of the most impoverished indigent people. So I know what I'm talking about. But at the same time, my friends are driving Mercedes and Lexus. They're shopping in Dubai and in the UK. That's where they're spending their money. So it's like, okay, well, what's going on here? So we need people like Traoré, the new elected leader of Senegal. We need people like Traoré is the guy at Niger. Help me, Tommy. What's the cat in Senegal? Faye.
Oh yeah,
Faye. People with a new vision. Right. Young people with a new vision. And time will tell. Time will tell. We've been through this before. We had Thomas Sankara and Burkina Faso. They killed him.
Yes.
Mobutu in power. Anytime Kwame Nkrumah, they kicked him out of the country. The West came in, took him out of power. Idi Amin, Patrice Lumumba, they murdered him. They just returned his teeth to his family. How many years has it been since he's been dead? And if somebody had inhumanity, like the people in Gaza, the soldiers who were shooting 12-year-olds in the head and saying, "Oh, it was an accident," but you shot him twice in the head. That's not an accident. But you have people of that inhumanity killing a man, boiling his body or burning his body, keeping his teeth for 50 years, and then to give back to the family. Sure, the family, we're glad they have a piece of their loved one, but it's like, can you imagine? The entire process itself is ridiculous. So these are the things that we are up against, and we need to understand. I would like for us to understand that it is through unity, and that unity is Pan-Africanism, understanding that we are of the collective we. And let me say that Pan-Africanism is undergirded by, or on the foundation of, the Southern African principle of Ubuntu, we before me, right? So that means when I get these PhDs and MAs and all these other letters behind my name, am I doing it for me, or am I doing it for my people? Am I doing it so I can buy a Lexus and have a 4-bedroom house, or am I trying to give back? I'm taking for a second and share a story, which I don't break down because I'm talking about my mother. Again, she just passed a couple of months ago. When I got ready, when I was at A&M, there's two things I want to tell you. When I was at A&M, I was in sociology class, and we spent, it was like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday, I can't remember. But each class period, we spent 2 or 3 class periods on each, it was called minority groups. Each group, the Native American family, Hispanic family, this other family. We got to the black group, we spent like half a class session, right? And one of the things they said was, and I wasn't knowledgeable of this. This wasn't part of my background. It said the black man leaves the family so the family can get on welfare. So I went home and I told my mother, because I'm staying at home. I'm from Brown, and it was right there. I told her what the instructor said, and she said, "Well, ask somebody." So I asked her friend, right? And he said, brother be at home smoking one of them cigarettes, one of them funny cigarettes, and he just roll out. I asked the insurance man. This was back in the day. Again, Tommy, I'm dating this. The insurance man who used to come and get the premium every month. And I asked him, and he was a sharp dresser, used to wear Stacey Adams and suspenders and smoke the pipe. And he was like, brother don't want to be there. He just roll out, he get a girlfriend or something. I asked my grandmother's husband, and he was probably in the 60s at the time, and he laughed, and he was like, they don't want to be around anymore. So I went to my mother and I said, I kind of felt like that, as opposed to something leaving the family so they could get on welfare. I said, but I didn't want to make black people look bad. She said, it's the truth. And from that moment on, I made a commitment to truth. No matter how, I'm sorry.
Take your time, brother.
Yeah, I made a commitment to truth from that day forward. I'll leave it at that.
Gotcha. I understand. So when I going back earlier to my statement about looking the same on the continent as it does in the diaspora, whether it's the United States, Europe, Canada, whatever the case is. The question is the strategy and the tactics, because we understand in the United States, Canada, Europe is very clear, that you have black folks who were stolen and taken to countries to build their economies and to build their wealth. Literally, they took the land from the indigenous Americans in what is now called the United States, brought the African over here to work the land, build the economy, create wealth. And so we've got the descendants of those folks who are now running the country. Now that's a little bit different, but kind of the same in principle, except in Africa, you have Africans, black Africans in most cases, who are, I guess, the face of it. You have Africans who are heads of state of Africans, but you've got the Europeans and those same colonizers running the wealth and the power through them so that they can continue to maintain access to the economy, to the wealth and the power. They're just using folks who look like them to exploit and oppress them. So when I say, does it look the same in terms of strategy and tactics? Does it look the same? Are you looking at different strategies and tactics on the continent versus in the diaspora, and why?
So you've heard the phrase "all skin folk ain't kin folk,"
Yes, sir.
right? And that is the mechanism, one of the mechanisms by which white supremacy works. It doesn't even have to do, just like a slave owner, it doesn't have to do the work. You do my work.
Yes.
Because you're even more accepted among your own people than I am. So you go out and spread my European hegemony and have them doing exactly what I want them to do because you are a coward, because you are weak. You see what I'm saying? You are fearful, or you are greedy. And they know exactly what to do to get certain people to do their bidding. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about the question is, how does it look?
In terms of strategy and tactics, Pan-Africanism on the continent versus in the diaspora.
Right. So for me, how it looks is through history, not present day. Because we still have people. How long has one of the brothers been in power? Longer than Mugabe, I think.
Yeah.
They did things when they first got in there, and then they just stayed. They canceled elections, or the elections are 100 to 1 or something like that. So that's not Pan-Africanism to me. That's just greed. That's just capitalism. That's you see what I'm saying? Pan-Africanism to me in current form looks like who we talked about, Brother Faye, Brother Traoré. Yes. These young African leaders who are coming in and saying, France, get the hell out. Look here, we're going to have our own currency. We're going to renegotiate all these other things. We're going to start. I saw a video the other day, how many projects the brother has started. You see what I'm saying? That's what I'm talking about. I don't want to deal with it. I saw a video, man. We're going back to Palestine. And you would think that the Black Caucus, oppressed peoples, would be supporting Palestine. These brothers and sisters are paid off by AIPAC. And you see them on video supporting what Israel is doing. So I bring that up to say this is the same thing that's going on in Africa, except it looks a little bit. Did we say it hit different? It just hits a little different. So we have to be.
Now South Africa has been pushing back, and South Africa has been putting Israel on blast in the World Court.
Absolutely. A couple of other places have been putting them on blast too. Somebody, what is it? Nicaragua, somebody has been challenging Germany or something like that. So yeah, that's positive. And we can talk more about that when we talk with I would leave that to defer to my man Wesley, who co-hosts African Genius podcast. And incidentally, we're on hiatus and we're still trying to get geared up. We're coming back. We're coming back.
Let me ask you, is it possible? Because even with unification, is it possible to execute without the economic and military power? Because you're dealing with forces who could care less about religious philosophy, democracy, etc. It's about power, it's about control. How viable is it to be able to execute and enforce Pan-Africanism, otherwise usurping control on the continent and or locally to whatever region of the world that you're living in without the economic power or the military power to be able to effectively fight back.
All revolution is bloody. That's Malcolm
Yes.
X. Dr. King said sometimes change must come through innocent suffering. Frantz Fanon talked about how there can't be any revolution without violence, right? When we look at the history of the West, of Europe, all their revolutions are bloody. But when it comes to the Negro, civil rights movement, oh, we want you to be peaceful. And we talk about Africa and we talk about coups or whatever. Oh, that's not the way to do it. Violence is not the way. They're not saying that about Israel.
Right.
Nobody's telling them. You see what I'm saying? So there's a hypocrisy there. So to answer your question, can it be done without violence? Maybe.
I would say it's hard. I would say it's a very hard sell, but because no other country, no other economy in the history that I'm aware of, even if for those who read the Bible literally, there has never ever been a revolution that I can recall in human history that is factual, that has been done without violence. If we're talking about being able to enforce or usurp power that has been taken from you to get it back and or to take it from someone else.
Right, because those in power, Dr. King said, those in power, lamentably, those in power rarely give up their privileges voluntarily.
Yes.
So they're not going to do it voluntarily. They're going to fight like hell. This is why we see things like, and I'm going to get into a discussion. I talk about Pan-Africanism under scientific socialism. I don't want to get into a whole conversation about socialism and capitalism. But when we look at capitalism continuously has to be fed and manipulated.
Yes.
Interest rates go up, they bring interest rates down, they do some other things, But on September 16th, 2008, capitalism died. And that wasn't the first time it died. And how was it resurrected? Through socialism. What do you call a bailout? They took the public's money, the people's money, and paid the corporations.
Yep.
That's socialism. So I say that to say
they're not willing. Too big to fail.
Right. What kind of nonsense is that? So what I say that to say, they will do whatever it takes to maintain the vehicle through which they continue to gather wealth, hoard wealth, which is capitalism. They're not going to let that go easy, bro. It's not going easy. We're going to have to take it. How
do you do that, considering that the folks that we're talking about, whether on the continent or throughout the diaspora, are the most peaceful, the most spiritual, if you want to go there, the most religious, the most supportive of those who have oppressed and exploited them?
I was watching one of the alternative news sources, and they were saying how Israel was. I hate to keep harking on Israel, but it's real. It's what's happening, and how they want to stamp out Hamas. But you are killing entire families.
Yes,
you're killing mothers and fathers and children. What do you think? How do you think those babies are gonna feel that who do survive? What is their mentality gonna be? You think they're gonna be passive? You have just created the next generation of Hamas. And that's what needs to be done on the African continent. Right now, Africa doesn't talk about its history. And if it does, a lot of it is about how it was better under the British or the colonial powers. We need to educate ourselves and educate our brothers and sisters. They have to educate themselves. That's where Pan-Africanism comes in, because it is work. This is not an overnight solution. This is not a my generation or your generation. I remember again, my mother used to say, while the black man is sleeping, the white man is planning. They plan like the Chinese on a 100-year basis. Then they break it down to 20 years. Then they break it down to 10 years and 5 years. That way it's intergenerational, and every generation has work to do. But we're looking for a Messiah. We're looking for a white Jesus to come down and save us, a white Moses to part the river and to lead us to freedom. That's not going to work, people. There is work involved. I have spent the last, and I had to use myself as an example because, like I said, I'm just a good brother trying to make a difference, man. I spent the entirety of my adult life in hardship because I told the truth and I work for my people. And that comes at a price. And I give all respect to my mother because that's who she made me. I remember I went to her one time. I had broken up with this sister, right? This is the only sister I've ever taken home to meet my mother from DC to Texas. And we broke up right after that. And I remember I was, y'all brothers know what I'm talking about. You won't admit it, but I was just, but what do they say, beside myself. I was just, and I called my mother and I was like, why do I have to fight so hard? She said, that because that's how I raised you. That's how I raised you. So we have to continue to fight. And in that is how I sustain myself, knowing who I am as an African, right? I will face fear, I will face temptation, and whatever else you throw at me because I'm an African. I'm not scared. I used to say when I lost a job, I know how to be poor. I don't know how to deal with a lot of money. So when I didn't have a lot of money, I was cool. I know how to be poor. I ate ramen noodles for years, literally for years. But we have to be committed to our people. And the only way that you can love yourself and be committed, Malcolm X said, the more you understand and the more you love Africa, the more you will understand and love yourself. And that's why they're taking CRT and African history out of education, because they know the more you love Africa, the more you understand Africa, the more you're going to love yourself, and you're not going to put up with the BS that they're throwing at us. And on the flip side, they will be forced to respect us because the truth will come out as to what we have done, what we have contributed to humanity. And humanity began in Africa. Let's be clear.
Gotcha. Got a couple of comments on here. Shirley Staten, welcome to the chat line. Welcome to the show. Thank you for having us. Haven't seen Shirley in a while, at least on the chat line. Also, we got Edward Willis. Thank you, Edward, for jumping on. I think he's referring to something we were talking about a little bit earlier in terms of the ability to be able to execute on Pan Africanism. Says, shouldn't you say we are not going to let it go easily? I think you kind of referred to it just a little bit differently. You're not gonna get there without a fight. Nothing. No power concedes nothing without a demand.
That's right.
Frederick Douglass. So he says, when we travel to Africa, we tend to go there with Western business concepts and Western investment goals.
So Seun Kuti, y'all familiar with Fela Kuti, the late great Fela Kuti, his youngest son, Seun Kuti, he has a podcast, and he said, Africa does not need investment. By nature, investment is, and we know this, just like capitalism, same concept, you want to take out more than you put in. So when we talk about African investment, and I said this in my little talk I had at the LBJ school, I said that has been mostly characterized by you go and find a village of women, make some purses or some beads for $2. You pay them $2 and you sell it on the internet for $60. That's investment in Africa. And so Seun Kuti says Africa does not need investment. Africa needs development, right? So then
define the difference. Define the difference.
So the difference, like I said, development is we're going into, when you go to Africa, or if you want to go and settle there or whatever, or have a relationship with Africa, is that you're bringing something to the table. You're not looking at Africa as a cash cow. I'm going to go here and find this group of young women, old women, and make these purses and bring them back to the U.S. and made in Africa and sell it for $60, and you paid them $1.50 a day. You're taking money out of Africa. What are you giving to Africa? What are you building? And that's, again, the Pan Africanism. We're supposed to be building institutions. But again, we have this Western mindset of, I have to make profit. You see what I'm saying? But that's not going to last long. There's a time and a place for everything. Capitalism was fine when there was plenty of resources, plenty of land. It's not like that anymore. Resources
Africa still has plenty of resources and plenty of land.
And that's why they're there.
Yes. And now the French and the Dutch and the Brits and all the other European countries, I won't say they have been completely replaced because they still have access to the resources, but now you have China. Now you have Russia. And I guess really the mantra and the narrative is, okay, you're passing it from one colonizer possibly to another.
I'm sorry, I was trying to read a comment without my glasses.
Turkey now charges $400,000 if you want to come live in Turkey.
Wow.
Gotcha. But the statement was, you had I guess the traditional European powers, the Brits, the French, the Portuguese, the Spaniards, etc., who basically went in and extracted the wealth, human and mineral, in order to build their economies. And so everything that, in my opinion, folks want to go to Europe for, whether that's London, whether that's Paris, any place you want to go, Europe was built through Africa. And so I always find it interesting when people want to say they want to go to the great European countries, Portugal.
Right.
None of that is there without the exploitation of Africa.
That's right.
None of it.
None of this is here without the exploitation of Africa.
You're correct. You're correct. All that being said, getting back to the original point, and then let's kind of talk about what the future of Pan-Africanism looks like. So where is Pan-Africanism today from what you are seeing, boots on the ground, grassroots, and where is Pan-Africanism going? Where do you see it going? Where is it at today, and then where is it going?
So let me say this. I guess to my detriment, I'm not one to join groups, but that's almost a tenet of Black African liberation struggle, is that you join an organization and help build that or whatever. But I see myself as maybe a free agent, to use a sports term. I'm gonna participate in whatever group is there. As at the University of Texas where I work, I was in a leadership position with the Black Faculty Staff Association. That's been done away with the whole cutting the DEI stuff.
Yep.
I worked with the Urban League when I lived in DC. I was a part of the Pan African Student Youth Movement, which was a socialist group back in the early 90s. So that's important. So I say that to say, how does Pan Africanism look? In a general sense, I don't know.
I guess the question is, are there? I mean, we talked earlier about Marcus Garvey, the UNIA. They didn't call it. They didn't call it Pan-Africanism then, but
yep, they did.
If we look at the Nation of Islam during probably its greatest heights, I mean, I think UNIA probably historically, if not, was the largest organization of people of the African diaspora on a grassroots level, period. We look at the Nation of Islam, didn't look the same as UNIA, but in concept, they're building communities, they're building economies, they're building pride in the way that you look at who you are culturally. Is there anyone out there doing that type of work today at a individual level? Yes, you. At a grassroots level, do you see that today? And I know you have your ears to the ground.
I got my ears to the ground.
I ain't trying to put you on blast, but who do you see out there on the grind collectively or at a grassroots level? I mean, we talked about the Black Panther Party. We talked about other movements and other groups.
So here's the wonderful thing, Brother Tommy. Social media, the internet, you can go turn on, and this is what I spend my time doing. I'm going from podcast to video, and you have people like our classmate, Roland Martin. You have the brother, Dr. Umar. Again, Sheun Kuti has his podcast. So it's about information, right? And these are the people that I tune into to hear what's going on. Brother Mark Lamont Hill, his podcast, he has like 3 or 4 podcasts every day, and he's on Al Jazeera. So those are the type of things that are going on. I don't know if the world is the same as it was 30 years ago or 50 years ago or 100 years ago, because again, we have to embrace the technology. And the way that the people are spreading the word of Pan-Africanism is through mediums like this, platforms like this, Black Men Speak. You know what I'm saying? I tune into this religiously. You know that. when I'm in Brazil and I tune in to Black Men Speak. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So again, those are the instruments, the tools, the platforms, the voices that are out there. So I don't know about particular groups that meet. Dr. Carr, In Class with Carr on Saturday, the Nubia, that platform is huge. It's international. But I guess most of the platforms are international. But if you get involved with something like that, and again, I'm telling you, once you sit down and start to study our history, who we were before we were slaves. Remember that movie with Muhammad Ali and George Foreman, When We Were Kings?
Yes.
When we were kings. When you study and learn how we were kings, it will change you. I remember they did a documentary, I think it was Eyes on the Prize or something. Sonia Sanchez, the famous sister poet, she said something about when they used to watch Malcolm X on the TV, and then their parents would come in and turn it off. And she was like, but it was like, you open up the shades and a little bit of sunshine come in and you close. She said, you already got the little sunshine. So that's what I'm saying.
We got a couple of questions on here. I want to make sure we address them with the time that we've got. So, Edward, does the brother, that meaning you, favor economic partnerships in Africa without wealth extraction? If so, for how many years or generations? That's the first question.
Okay, so we're doing African time. European time is from A to A prime, right? So we're going to say we're going to do a plan for 5 years. And I'm not knocking what you said, but I understand because we all got bills to pay.
The question is, do you favor economic partnerships in Africa without wealth extraction?
Yes.
What does the timeline look like? What is
that? But that's what I'm saying. So the timeline is there. I don't deal with timelines, and we're dealing with African peoples. Why must there be a timeline? That's a Western construct, right?
Gotcha.
So if you have something to give to Africa, build it. Why does it have to be a timeline? And I guarantee you, whatever your timeline is set, dealing with the brothers and sisters on the continent, it's a wash. It's a wash.
All right. We got another question here. Have you thought about starting a Pan-African community funded by Black folks here in America, or expat to a part of Africa to start a new chapter in our lives? Your knowledge is mind-blowing.
Well, you flatter me. There are enough groups and platforms for you to join. Like I said, they're doing some wonderful things with Dr. Greg Carr and Karen Hunter. You can find them on Saturdays on YouTube. It's called In Class with Carr. And then you can pay a nominal fee and join what they call Nubia. And it's like study groups and all that kind of thing. I mean, it's fascinating, So, and he's a couple of years older than us. And he was in DC, I think, at the same time I was there, some of the same places. I don't know him personally. But yeah, so you can do things like that. There's no reason for me to start anything new. And I'm not the organizer. But like I said, I'm kind of a maverick because I'm gonna do me. And Tommy knows that. Just real quick, when I moved to DC in December of '89, that January, Mayor Barry was arrested for smoking crack. And he did his thing, went away, came back, and his whole entourage. Barry's a genius. In the '60s, he was canvassing with African clothing, dashikis and stuff, right? So when he came out of jail, he had his whole entourage would have on African type stuff. And I looked at the TV one day and I said, if I'm ever in a financial position, I'm going to don myself in African clothing every day because we look good in our stuff. I've worn African clothing every day until recently because I got fat and the styles changed. They wearing all that tight stuff, but I ain't trying to show everybody my whiskey gut. But I wore African clothing without working out.
And I can vouch for that.
You can attest to that. Every single day. That was one of the things I said. If I'm gonna be an African, I'm gonna look like an African. So everybody, when you see me coming, right? You're not just gonna dismiss me. I am here. I forgot where I was going with that, but anyway.
Got a comment. A lot of us are looking to retire and take our money to a country where it will go further. I think you have strong knowledge and leadership that you would be a phenomenal leader, and to encourage and shepherd folks to Africa to become expats and live life there on the continent.
Wow. You have low expectations.
And we've got about 5 minutes left, so we're going to kind of close things out now. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to make some closing comments. where do you see, I mean, and you did refer to it a little bit earlier when I asked the question. It's about information technology. We've got platforms, the 20th century model, it doesn't make sense now when you have access to channels where you can build communities, you can organize online. And I mean, when you look at the speed in which the political climate change, potentially the economic climate changes, and everything is done at the snap of a finger.
Mm-hmm.
What is in your vision, do you see potentially as the future of where does Pan Africanism now go next? You talked about the Roland Martins, you talked about the Dr. Carrs, you've talked about Dr. Umars, who are just kind of taking their show on the road on the World Wide Web. What else do you see out there?
Well, for me, it doesn't have to be big and shiny. If you want to start a study group, just start reading books, man. One of the things that I wanted to do with the Black Afrikanist ASAR Association at UT, and I got pushback. Go to the boys club and volunteer. That was the other thing I wanted to say about my mother. Before I'm kind of lost. So I was of the capitalist mindset when I was getting ready to graduate from Texas A&M. That I want to go to Wall Street and make all the money, right? And she was like, "No, that's not how you do it. You go and volunteer at the boys club like Joe did. Your flag football coach. You go volunteer like Freddie, your tackle football coach." And we had like a knockdown drag out about it. Turns out she was right. I left the A&M saying that I wanted to be a human rights activist, and I remember human rights activist, and I always laugh and say I failed miserably. But I became a community builder in DC. Everybody knew me. I mean, not that fame is important, but everybody knew me as the African man in DC because they knew I was somewhere working with the youth, trying to contribute to the betterment of their lives and their development. And I did that for 25 years in Washington, D.C., just because my mother told me you need to go volunteer. So you can do that. Start a study group with your closest friends, your sisters, your brothers, or whatever. Read this book. Let's talk about it. Turn on Al Jazeera, turn off CNN, turn on Roland Martin, look for Dr. Umar's videos, look for Kwame Nkrumah, go to Dr. Carr and Karen Hunter on Saturday and listen to what they got to say. And I guarantee you, if you watch Dr. Carr, you will leave that broadcast with a list of books as long as my arm.
Gotcha.
That you want to check out.
Report on here that I want to put out. A Cosman Cal TV says, this sounds like religion. Is belief needed to be Pan-African? What if I'm not African? Are you going to try to convince me I am? You can respond and then I will respond.
I don't know who you are. I can't see you. Don't know what your background is. And this is not religion. If anything, I'm irreligious. I'm not saying it ain't got nothing to do with religion. I'm talking about the here and now. The real, the politics, the what's happening here on the ground now.
Gotcha. And I would probably say to the individual who is asking that question, who I don't know either, what is religion? What is religion? I mean, by definition, if you want to go to the Bible, you want to go to the Bible. If you want to go to the dictionary, it's a set of practices reinforced by a set of beliefs. What is capitalism? What is so-called democracy? Does the democracy that we think we have in the United States truly a democracy? Or is it the guise of a democracy?
That's right.
What is political party? Religion, whether it's Democratic or Republican, what is a political party if it is not the practices? If you look at any church, any particular faith, what is religion?
Teach, Tommy, teach.
I'll stop right there as we have about a minute left. Great information coming from Andre. Great information. So striving for knowledge is enhancing in itself. Thank you so much. So I will give you the last word, and then we will close the show. It's been good as always, brother.
Hey, man, I appreciate you having me, man, and I appreciate all the comments from the people watching, people listening. Just stay in the struggle, man, and it is a struggle. It doesn't have to be something bad or something negative. It's just a struggle. We know that. And you're not necessarily building for yourself. You're building not for your children or your grandchildren, but your grandchildren's grandchildren, because that's what they're doing. That's how we got in this situation. They saw opportunity to build for the future. All those cats that enslaved us from the beginning, they dead. But we are still living out their legacy. We're still living out their paradigm. And how many? 500 years. And we're still living it out. So let's make a 500-year plan and move forward. And everybody make a contribution. And this is something else my mother used to say. She said, and y'all from the country know what I mean. She said, give out, but don't give up. Give out means you get tired or whatever. You know, my car didn't give out. We talk like that in the country. Give out, but don't give up.
Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, you have it from Uncle ASAR ALKEBULAN. Thank you very much, brother. We appreciate you. You know we're going to have you back. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for this evening. We hope you got some value from tonight's show. Of course, join us back next week, every Wednesday, because if you know it's going to be Wednesday night, it will be
Black Man
Speak. Good night, everyone.